Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Should be a great late night conversation. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's have a great late night chat. So glad to be here. Yeah, let's get going. Let's get the show on the road. Woo! Yeah.
I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here. Yeah, we're just going to have another late night conversation like we always do. It's Labor Day today in the United States, and most of the world. Labor Day is on May 1st, International Workers' Day, the communist one. But America is a very strange country with a lot of anti-communism in the culture. So our Labor Day is in September. It's I believe the first weekend in September is when Labor Day is. Labor Day was always around the time school was getting started. You'd have a day off pretty early on in school for Labor Day. It's been that way since the 1930s. It was kind of a compromise during the Roosevelt years that they could have a Labor Day, but it couldn't be the Labor Day of the communists. Great, and I'm glad to have you. Glad to have you. Your membership came through, and we're glad to have you as a member. And people are always joining the Center for Political Innovation, and we're very excited about it. Before we get going here, a couple announcements, and thank you for pointing that out, that you are the person who joined, by the way. Someone did join today, and we're up to about 115 members at this point, which is great, the Center for Political Innovation. But a couple quick announcements regarding CPI. First things first, our national convention is coming up on December 2nd in Portland, Oregon. The Center for Political Innovation will be having its national convention. Hooray! It's going to be great. It's going to be really, really awesome. December 2nd, Portland, Oregon. We are putting it together. So be there. If you're a CPI member, please be there. If you are an ally or a friend or someone who wants to learn more about our organization, if you're just looking to have a good time, be there. Absolutely be there. We would love to have you there. Absolutely. So I wanted to get that out of the way. Roy, you literally stole my thunder. I was planning to talk about that already, and I will get to it, Roy. But there you go. You're on the list, and you can do what Roy just did, by the way. You can do what Roy just did and send in a super chat question or a Rumble rant question or a Rockfin tip question. Those questions are going to be answered in the second half of the show for those of you who are not aware. I'll finish that announcement in a little bit. But another quick announcement for those of you maybe just tuning in. We are also planning to have, just like every day, a morning message. We have morning messages every day on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. Different members are doing morning messages. We just had morning message number 50, I believe, that went up, or maybe it was 49 that went up, but we're doing them every day. We only missed one day so far, but that's okay. We're going to keep going. We've only missed one day since we started doing them, and we are going to keep marching ahead. I'm hoping we can go 100 days straight without missing one. So now we're starting back at the beginning. We only missed one day. Totally my fault. I just forgot to upload the message. I was exhausted that night, did some interviews and stuff, but regardless, we're still plowing ahead. We've been having one almost every single day. We've only missed one day, and we're up at message number 50, and I'm trying to go for 100 days straight without missing a message. I recorded a message while I was out with my wife today. Other people have been sending me messages all weekend, and I've been uploading them and editing them, and we got one queued up for tomorrow morning already. And we're set. We are gonna have morning messages. This is about keeping our community intact. This is about having people start their day with revolutionary hope and optimism. This is about giving a platform to our members to express themselves and put their views forward. This is also about giving a platform to friends of CPI, a place that we can kind of learn to encourage each other and all of that. So, if you want to start your day that way, I think you should. Tune in every morning. The videos premiere at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. In addition to that, if you want to make a message, we always appreciate having our members send them in. So if you want to take a whack at making a morning message to help motivate and encourage our CPI community, by all means, do one. We have many different types of messages, big, strong, short, long. Some people film them outside. Some people film them inside. John McCarthy recently did one from the Labor Day parade in Chicago. And it was really beautiful, and I preceded that with some Chinese music, and Tim has been doing them, and Noah and Elizabeth has done them. Gabby has done them. There have been so many members of CPI. Killian just did one today that was tremendous. There's been so many members of CPI who've done tremendous messages. So we just want to keep that tradition rolling on. So if you want to record a morning message, great. And tune in to the CPI, Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. Absolutely. Thank you, John. Tune into the CPI YouTube channel every morning for a CPI morning message. Just wanted to remind people of that. Those are the two announcements I wanted to mention before we get going here. Now, the way this works is I give my opening remarks about whatever's on my mind for the night. We talk about politics, world history, stuff like that. That's what we always do. And then I do a roll call where we find out who is on the other side of the camera, who is watching these conversations. And then from there, after we do the roll call, then from there, I answer people's questions for the rest of the night. And I see we've got two super chats already. We take them in the form of Rumble rants on the Rumble. We take them in the form of Rockfin tips on the Rockfin. You got something you want me to talk about in the second half of our show, just send me a question and I will give you an answer. It may not be the answer you're looking for, but I do my best to give good answers to questions. Sometimes people ask questions that really just get me going, and I have a lot to say. So I encourage you to do that. Make the second half of the show worthwhile. Get the second half of the show going. David Fox is reminding everyone that beverages will forever always be unnamed. He likes tomato juice. My grandfather was a big fan of tomato juice. Interesting. I never developed a taste for tomato juice. I'm more of an orange juice kind of guy. Grape juice, particularly, I like. But there you go. Unnamed diet beverage as the official drink of CPI, etc. So I guess I'll just get into my opening remarks right now. I'll be writing down the super chats. But this is pretty chill. It is Labor Day, holiday weekend here in the United States. But I did have a couple things to share with you all. First of all, this afternoon, I had a great chat, first of all, with Jeff Young. I don't know if people remember Jeff Young, but Jeff Young is a candidate for office. He's run for office as a Democrat many times in Kentucky on a platform of abolishing the CIA. And he just read my book, Letter to Bob Avakian. He read it, and so he wanted to talk to me about it. So we had a conversation about it this afternoon, and as soon as this live stream is over, I will be uploading that conversation to YouTube so you can all see the conversation that Jeff Young and myself had about my new book, Letter to Bob Avakian. It was a lovely chat. Jeff has been an activist for many years. He was involved in the struggle against the arming of the Contras in Nicaragua. He was involved in the peace movement and the Democratic Socialists of America when it got started. So he had an interesting perspective on my book, Letter to Bob Avakian. we had a great back and forth. You remember Saturday, Peter Coffin and I had a chat about it. And I've got a number of different conversations about that book coming up. So check it out, folks. That'll be coming up pretty soon. And then after that, after I had my chat with Jeff Young this afternoon about my new book, after that, my wife and I, we rode the ferry. Now, I don't know if you all know what the ferry is, but, New York City has public transportation. You got the subways, they're the most famous. We got the buses. But because New York City is, it's between the East River and the ocean, we have the ferry system in New York City. So my wife and I rode the ferry today. We didn't really do much. We rode the ferry. We got on in Brooklyn. We went over to Dumbo Park in Queens, and we ate some ice cream. And then we got back on the ferry. It's very cheap, very, very cheap. And it's not an expensive way. We got to go by the Statue of Liberty. You get to see the Statue of Liberty. I mean, it's not like you're not like right next to it, but you can see it because you're in the harbor where it is. It was a lovely afternoon. And we even thought of all of you. We even made a nice little video for you. So I will put the little video of my wife and I riding the ferry this afternoon. I'll put it on the screen for you all to watch. Here we go. Labor Day weekend from New York City. We're riding the ferry here. We want to remind everyone how much we appreciate your support, how much we appreciate you staying true to the cause. Stay strong. Happy Labor Day weekend. We've got a great year ahead of us. Stay strong and struggle. Yep. That was us riding the ferry, my wife and I riding the ferry, and we thought of all of you, so we made a nice little message for you all while we were riding the ferry. It was a splendid afternoon. I got to say, allergies in New York right now, this time of year, are bad. But as soon as the sun started setting, I tell you, my energy level just increased suddenly, right? I think it's the hot sun and the allergies kind of made me a little bit drowsy throughout the day today. But, as soon as the sun came up, and I made a morning message in the park that we were in, that we rode the ferry to. So I'll be editing that together about some history related to the Statue of Liberty. It'll be kind of a surprise for all of you. So be sure to tune in to the morning messages later this week, because you'll be very surprised and impressed, I would assume, by the message that we have related to the history of the Statue of Liberty, an important historical event that happened there. So we got that going on. I just wanted to mention that. Now, trying to see if there's any other news that I wanted to mention. If there was any other news I wanted to mention. I did want to touch on the Burning Man. The Burning Man thing. But before I get to the Burning Man thing, I wanted to show this video that was sent to me by a CPI member and a good friend of the program, good friend of our show, Tyler McConnell. And he was frustrated by this, as was I. This is from a conservative crypto bro podcast. They were calling out BlackRock, the British corporation that is pushing degrowth so hard. This was an exchange that they had about BlackRock on the podcast, and he just had to send this to me. So, Tyler, shout out to you. Thanks for sending me this video, and here we go.
Script. And if you look at Trudeau, if you look at Biden, Benioff, and especially Larry Fink, they literally have gotten a script from the World Economic Forum, maybe straight from Klaus Schwab, because they're all saying the exact same thing the exact same way. So that's why, among many other reasons, I lump him into that Malthusian Marxist cult.
Yeah. So he's talking about BlackRock and degrowth. And he says that they're part of the Malthusian Marxist cult. That's the term that is used. Well, anyone who watches this program knows that Malthusian Marxist is an oxymoron. There is no such thing as a Malthusian Marxist. Karl Marx wrote a book against Malthusianism called Theories of Surplus Value. Malthusianism, Those are the economic ideas of Robert Thomas Malthus. And Robert Thomas Malthus was a British economist who looked at the French Revolution, and he wrote a book arguing that the French Revolution happened because of overpopulation. He invented the term overpopulation. He argued that the food supply doesn't grow as rapidly as the population does, and that the population outstrips the food supply, and that is the cause of calamities. And the term overpopulation, arguing that there are too many people in the world, and this is the cause of economic problems, that is Malthusian economics. Marxism rejects Malthusianism 100%. Good question, Funky. Marxism rejects Malthusianism 100%. And that Marx, in this book I've got right up here, Theories of Surplus Value, has entire sections. This is the third volume of Capital, has many sections debunking the economic theories of Robert Malthus, debunking them and showing that it is not accurate to describe the bulk of the population as non-productive consumers. That Malthusian economics argues that you have too many people and there's just not enough resources. There's limited resources. Malthusianism argues that everything should be done to kill off poor people, that they should court the return of the plague. I mean, it's a vicious essay that Malthus wrote, The Principle of Population Growth, arguing they need to drive down the population, and that, in order to stabilize the economy, they should reduce the population. And Marx ripped it to shreds because he pointed out that the source of all wealth is human labor. And if you have more people and those people's labor is being utilized, then you're going to have more wealth, right? That human beings, it's human labor that creates all wealth. It's human creativity that advances and makes the production of wealth more efficient by changing the way we interact with our environment. So the notion that economic problems are caused by overpopulation is not rational, right? The more people you get, the more wealth you get. The more people you get, the more creativity you get. Human beings create wealth. And so the idea that there's too many people consuming limited resources is completely contrary to Marxism. Marxism says that with socialism and rational public ownership of the means of production and central planning, the anarchy and chaos of the market can be eliminated, and the productivity of human labor can be concentrated and rationally organized and maximized. And the problem built into capitalism, the problem of poverty created by abundance, poverty amid plenty, the problem of overproduction, the tendency of the falling rate of profits can be eliminated. And that can lead to a huge expansion in living standards, increasing the amount of wealth in all of society, laying the basis for all social hierarchies to be dismantled and human beings to live a new form of existence on the basis of each according to their own ability, to each according to their needs. We can reach a society where labor becomes life's prime want and no longer a necessity, where technology has advanced so much that very little work is required, that human beings can live a life of luxury and prosperity. That is what Marxism argues. It is completely contrary to Malthusianism. The problem is that a lot of these libertarian crypto bros, they seem to believe that any government intervention into the economy is Marxism or socialism. And this is the result of neoliberal indoctrination. In America, we have all been told that socialism is when the government does stuff. That if the government does something, that is socialism. And that capitalism is a free market where the government doesn't do anything. And that's not correct. There is a state sector in every capitalist economy. And it is necessary even to have basic capitalism for the government to facilitate it to some degree or other. Roads exist to facilitate the market. The U.S. Constitution mandates that the government maintain a post office in order to facilitate the market. Because if you had a private postal service, that private postal service might favor some businesses over others. That just to maintain the market, you need the state to build roads, you need the state to have a military to protect the country, you need the state to maintain a postal service. And that those things are not socialism, they're necessary state activities in order to maintain the capitalist market. Socialism is when the banks, factories, and industries no longer function according to profits, when the anarchy of production, profits are no longer in command, but rather the means of production have been forced to operate on the interests of all of society. It is public ownership and public control of the banks and the factories and the major centers of economic power. That is what socialism is. It is when the economy works in the interests of the people and not the private owning class. And you can have a market sector in socialism. Most modern socialist societies have a market sector, whether it's, foreign investment, whether it's domestic private companies, whether it's worker cooperatives, which are a big part of socialism in Nicaragua and Venezuela. That socialist societies tend to have profit-making, for-profit private corporations, but they are under the control of the state, and their activities fit in with an overall state central plan dictated by the government and dictated by a government that comes out of a revolutionary mass movement. What BlackRock is pushing and what the World Economic Forum is pushing is not Marxism. It is an attempt to stabilize capitalism with degrowth, and that's called fascism. That is the economic basis of fascism. And they are not eliminating profits in command. They are not eliminating the anarchy of production. They are simply imposing controls and mechanisms to try and reduce the output and reduce living standards. And that is the basis of fascist economics. And if you read R. Palm Dutt and his great book that he published, it's just a tremendous book called Fascism and Social Revolution, he describes that being the nature of Nazi economics and fascist economics, is the retreat from the machine. So we need to make that clear, because a lot of these libertarians are people who believe in economic growth, and they're libertarians. That guy had a shirt on that said rebel capitalist, right? He's a rebel capitalist because he believes in economic growth. He wants to go out and invent things. He wants to go out and start a business. And he's convinced that the degrowth methods being imposed on lower level capitalists like him are communism. When in reality, if you go to any communist country, lower level capitalists like him are being propped up. In China, the government is constantly providing aid and loans to guys like him to start businesses. In Nicaragua, the success of their socialist program has been their micro entrepreneurship program. Socialist countries believe in economic growth. And it is the Western capitalist societies that are being dominated by the ultra-rich monopolies that still have profits in command, not an overall state development central plan, that are trying to stabilize their irrational system by imposing fascistic degrowth methods. And this is an important distinction that we need to make. There's, on the one hand, there is socialist central planning, what they have in China, what they have in Vietnam, what they had in the Soviet Union, what they have in Cuba, what they have in Nicaragua, socialist central planning. On the other hand, there is fascist degrowth as a method to save capitalism, driving down living standards, reducing consumption, trying to stop and destroy economic growth in order to save and stabilize the capitalist system. That is fascism. That is the economics of fascism. It is capitalism in decay. So I wanted to get that out of the way. We repeat that, and we talk about that on many, many of these streams, but it is such an important point. You cannot make it enough times. We are against degrowth. We want a good life for everyone. Nothing is too good for the working class. We want to raise the living standards. We want to maximize the amount of personal property that people enjoy. right? We want people to own their own homes. Home ownership and the rate of home ownership is higher in communist countries than it is in capitalist countries. In China, people own their own homes at a higher rate than they do in the United States. In Cuba, people own their own homes at a higher rate than they do in the United States. We are all for maximizing personal property at the expense of the private property of the ultra monopolies. And we are all about economic growth and stimulating and allowing and guiding businesses to flourish with economic growth. However, we understand that it is the chaos of the market, the irrationality of greed, that is the greatest barrier to economic growth. And we want a government of action that will fight for working families by controlling the means of production in order to stabilize the economy and unleash economic growth. That is the nature of socialism. And any attempt to forcibly degrow because they think wealth is bad, that is fascism. That is fascism. So I wanted to make that abundantly clear. So now on to the issue of Burning Man. I'm going to see if I can find a news report. You know, it's best to show the images. So I don't know if you all know about what happened at Burning Man. At Burning Man, right? But Burning Man, burning. Isn't it interesting how people change the emphasis? You know, it's generally called Burning Man, but some people are like Burning Man, right? You know, I mean, they say it differently. But you know, this is a gathering that happens every year. Every year, this gathering happens in where is it? In oh goodness, I can't remember where. Where does this gathering happen? It happens in Arizona, or where is it? Arizona or California? Where do they have Burning Man? I don't even know where they have the goddamn thing. Where do they have Burning Man? Where do they have Burning Man? Where is it that they have the Burning Man festival every year? Does anyone know? I can't even remember. It's somewhere out west. It's a big hippie gathering. Nevada, northern Nevada. Right. It's in Nevada, right near Las Vegas, Nevada. It's in the desert. And every year for the Burning Man festival, they have a big gathering out in the middle of the desert, and there's a lot of concerts that go on there. There's a lot of different rock and roll bands that play. I believe they don't use currency. They have people trade different items rather than using currency. They have like a bartering system, and people trade with each other, and that's how they take care of each other. Some kind of weird, social experiment that they do. But this year, it didn't go so well. And the reason it didn't go so well is because it rained. The desert is usually a pretty dry place, great place to have an outdoor concert because the chances of rain are quite slim. This year, it did not work out that way. And it rained, and you would think that, raining at a concert, well, it sucks. Oh, no. This was a really big deal. It was a really big deal. I'm going to put on the report from CBS News about what happened. I'll show you how bad it got. They say a little rain never hurt anybody, and that is true, but this was not a little bit of rain, and it certainly hurt somebody. So yeah, I'm going to put on the report, and then I'll kind of give you some historical context to this, because this is kind of interesting, because there's some interesting history that I want to talk about. So there we go. Let me just put it on for you. I'm just waiting for it to come up. Yeah, it's on the desktop, but now I have to wait it. Don't you love this? I'm waiting for it. Anyway, I'm going to give some historical context. After we watch the video of the disaster that happened this weekend at Burning Man, right? At the Burning Man concert, the Burning Man gathering, things didn't go so well. All right, here we go.
Harrowing escape to make it out of Burning Man.
The entire place is absolutely just soaked.
After 2 days of heavy rainfall left more than 70,000 trapped in thick mud in the middle of the remote Nevada desert.
Driving a vehicle right now is impossible. There is absolutely no way you can move a vehicle through this right now.
The local sheriff's office now probing the death of one person during the rain event. The cause still under investigation. But the festival says the death was not storm-related.
I think I could be trapped here for a couple more days.
The unprecedented downpour started Friday. Festival organizers telling burners to shelter in place and to conserve food, water, and fuel while closing roads both in and out of the playa.
Did you all know that this was likely going to happen?
We get a daily weather report. There was no cause for panic.
Burning Man CEO Marianne Goodell telling me the self-reliant community of burners came well prepared for desert extremes.
We've made it really clear that we do not see this as an evacuation situation and that the community is patient and the water is drying up.
The sludge not stopping some from making the treacherous journey by foot.
We took everything we needed to survive on our backs.
Desperate to make it back to their children at home, Bear Kate and his wife walked 6 miles to the nearest open road.
There were actually rivers that were flooding through the playa where we had to test and see how deep they were. My wife was carried across the river by a very strong man who carried her on her back.
Some celebrities literally following in their footsteps.
We walked 3 miles now. We got, I think, 5 more.
DJ Diplo and comedian Chris Rock also trudging through the mud for miles before being rescued by Good Samaritans. Back at the camp, trapped burners coming together and holding on to hope that the weather finally clears in time for the annual Burn the Man finale, proving nothing can extinguish the spirit of this decades-long movement.
The Burning Man organization advises participants to delay their departures in order to avoid getting stuck, but people are free to leave whenever they want.
Makes you question what you would do if you were in that situation. Hopefully they get that resolved. Thank you, Chloe.
So, yeah, there you go. That was the report. So 70,000 people gathered for this big rock concert camp out in the desert. And it rained. And, you know, the desert's a pretty muddy place, and there was no way one could drive a vehicle. So they were all kind of stranded there. No food could be delivered. You couldn't leave. They were all kind of stranded there. And it was a bit of a problem. It was a security concern. Somebody died. Now, the death, we understand, was not related to the evacuation or whatnot. But many people have asked questions about the whole Burning Man thing. People have asked questions about it. You know, it's been going on for some time. And, you know, at the end of the festival, they do have that ritual where they burn a giant statue of a man. Many people have compared that to the Christopher Lee classic horror film, The Wicker Man, that involves, a similar kind of thing where they burn a wicker statue, but it has a person inside of it. It's a human sacrifice. Many people have asked questions about this. And I've known people who do Burning Man. I've never done Burning Man before, but I've known there are people who do Burning Man and they enjoy it and they find it to be a very amazing experience. And there's a lot of rock bands that do it. It's a very 1960s counterculture kind of thing. But that leads me to tell you about a couple interesting things, right? Because we now know that when I watched that report, I immediately thought of what I had read about Woodstock, right? Woodstock was the original famous outdoor multi-day hippie concert, right? 1969, August of 1969, the word went out all over New York City and the surrounding areas that there was going to be a huge outdoor music festival with all the big rock and roll bands, the Rolling Stones and the Who, and all of them were going to be in Woodstock, New York for a concert. The word went out, and I believe, how many people went to Woodstock? How many people went to Woodstock? How many people went to Woodstock? 400,000 people, right? Almost 500,000, 400,000 people. Weedos. What's a weedo? I don't know what that is. You're gonna have to clarify. Weirdos. Yeah. About 400,000 people went out to Woodstock. Now, at the time that the Woodstock concert happened in August of 1969, the whole thing was clearly staged from above, and I'll get to that later. But they presented the Woodstock concert like it was part of the anti-war protest movement. They made a big point. I think the name of the festival was like so many days of peace and music. Peace signs were used to advertise it, etc. And they made it sound like it was a big gathering to do with the anti-Vietnam War protest movement. However, one of the famous moments at the Woodstock Music Festival was when Abby Hoffman, a political activist, a communist, an anti-imperialist, anarchist, leftist, leader of the Yippies, tried to get on the stage to make a political announcement. And he got on the stage and tried to make a political announcement. And the leader of the rock band The Who slammed a guitar into his head and kicked him off the stage. They were not there for political announcements. And I understand that in August of 1969, when the Woodstock Music Festival was happening, Sam Marcy, the leader of the Workers' World Party, he hated it. He hated it because he said this is about getting the young people out of the city. Because almost every day in the summer of 1969, there were young people fighting against the police because of opposing the Vietnam War. There were anti-war protests every single day in New York City in 1969, and the youth were in the streets every day fighting the police. And the anti-war protests were becoming very, very militant, and the Black liberation struggle had intensified. And that Sam Marcy said this is not a good thing. Getting all the young people that would be protesting and would be rioting and fighting against the government and burning military recruiting stations and having a confrontation with the police, getting them out of the city into the middle of some farm area where they do drugs for several days. This is not a good thing. And Sam Marcy saw it as a negative kind of thing and saw it as non-political. And he made a big point of pointing out that as much as they emphasized that Woodstock was about peace, and as much as they emphasized that it was an anti-war kind of thing, there was no politics at Woodstock. And so, hearing that bit of wisdom that Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party, a prominent American Marxist, arguably one of the more important post-World War II American Marxist leaders, right? I mean, PSL is based on his teachings. The Workers' World Party is based on his teachings. He organized, the big 1981 March on the Pentagon. And he was, if you're a tanky in America, Sam Marcy is a pretty pivotal and important figure. Based on that bit of wisdom, which I don't think is ever written down. I think Sam just said it to people. It was never written down. He never wrote an article about it. I began researching the Woodstock Music Festival. And what I found out was that Sam Marcy was more right than he could have ever imagined. So they portrayed Woodstock like it was somehow a spontaneous thing. And it was anything but spontaneous. It was completely planned by record companies in coordination with the government. So much so that all the artists who performed at Woodstock were flown in on U.S. military helicopters. The U.S. military arranged the flights for the big stars. Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, all of them were flown in by the U.S. Armed Forces. So this is supposed to be a big anti-war rally, except the one guy, Abby Hoffman, who tried to get on the stage and make a political speech, got beaten and hit over the head and thrown off the stage. And then the musicians themselves are flown in by the U.S. military. That's an interesting bit of information. On top of that, we find out that there was a camera crew. They had already paid for a Hollywood movie to be made about it before they ever made it. They paid, and they had a budget for millions of dollars to make a Hollywood movie about the event, to just, a Hollywood movie about the event. And they had a whole Hollywood film camera production crew there the whole time, filming various events that happened, interviewing people there, filming all the songs and all the concerts. That was another thing that happened. The second thing that happened was that the people that were there, it was arranged for them not to have the ability to leave. And this is very dark. But the way it was set up is all the people who were going to Woodstock, they went to one place and then they were transported to Woodstock in the middle of the cornfields on trucks, and they were left there. Right? And that was done intentionally, which is very weird. It was very, very weird. On top of that, there was not enough food at Woodstock for all these people. There was not enough food. There were no bathrooms. There were barely any porta-johns there. There were no bathrooms, but there were huge amounts of drugs. There were huge amounts of drugs for people at Woodstock. So all these people were basically transported to a place where they wouldn't be able to leave, where, the nearest place to walk was, they would have to walk 20 miles to get to the nearest place. They're in the middle of nowhere. And on top of that, there's no food there for them. There's no bottled water there for them. There's no toilets there for them, but there happened to be huge amounts of hallucinogenic drugs, just huge amounts of hallucinogenic drugs, and all kinds of elaborate flashing lights that are there. And so the event happened, and multiple people died at Woodstock. I don't know if you know this. There were deaths. There were a couple people who had probably passed out from drugs, and they were asleep in a cornfield. They got run over by a tractor and killed. There was another person whose appendix exploded, and he was trapped there. He couldn't get medical care, so he died from his appendix exploding. And the people that were there were absolutely miserable. And then there's a famous story of, it continued raining at Woodstock, and people were covered in mud. And on top of that, since there were no toilets, and gets gross, they were all pooping and shitting into one area. And when it rained, the rainwater that flooded mixed with the poop and shit. So people were walking through this sludge of poop and shit that they were walking through. And there's a story of, they got on the stage and they announced to the people at Woodstock, oh, it's gonna rain. And so the crowd couldn't stand it, and they all started chanting, no rain, no rain, no rain, no rain. But it rained anyway, and it covered them in rain. So these people are literally walking around in feces mixed with mud, and they don't have any food and they don't have any water, but they have huge amounts of drugs. They have there's more LSD there than you can ever believe. And apparently some of the LSD they were giving people was causing people, was not normal LSD. Apparently there was an announcement made from the stage warning about the quote unquote brown acid, right? And urging people to stop taking a certain type of LSD that was being distributed that was brown. They said, stop taking the brown acid. It's causing people to have different effects. That apparently they were testing, whoever was distributing the drugs was testing different brands of hallucinogens. And so one of the drugs they were giving people was causing people to flip out much more, and was endangering people, that they were, they were on the stage shouting, do not take the brown acid. This is a warning. Do not take the brown acid. Can you imagine Woodstock? I mean, this sounds like a complete and utter nightmare, right? I mean, it was a complete and utter nightmare. But they filmed the whole thing for a Hollywood movie. And then the news media reported on it as being this amazing thing, because it showed that peace was possible because there was no riot that broke out. Well, honestly, I hate to say it, but if I was with a crowd of 400,000 people and we found out that we had been trapped someplace without food, without water, and we were covered in mud and our own feces, I would riot. I would be angry, and I would get that crowd of 400,000 people together, and we would fight back, and we would demand that we get treatment, and we would fight, and we would resist. However, they didn't do that. What Woodstock proved is that if you can get 400,000 people stoned out of their minds on drugs and titillate them with rock and roll music and flashing lights, they'll tolerate anything. And that was the amazing thing. The ruling class was experimenting with mind control and seeing how much these people would take. It was a test. They were trying to see, how can we control people? How can we, if we drug people enough, will they tolerate circumstances that are intolerable. And they did. They clearly did. And it's pretty amazing when you look at the actual details of Woodstock. Woodstock was not a great development by any means. It was a pretty awful thing, and it was intended to divert people away from a political struggle. If they hadn't been at Woodstock, many of those young people would have been in the streets of New York City rioting against the Vietnam War and protesting. And it got them all out of Manhattan, which was a center of anti-war protests. And it got them into a place where they could be subjected to what was clearly some kind of weird experiment. Now, Fidel Castro writes about this. We published a book, the Center for Political Innovation did, called Fidel Castro Exposes the Synthetic Left. It's one of our books, and it's all of Fidel Castro's writings. And one of the first essays we include is Fidel Castro's piece where he talks about MK Ultra and all of that. And he talks about in the book that we published, he talks about how acid and LSD and Woodstock was very much engineered by the American government. And here I'll drop the link to our book, Fidel Castro Exposes the Synthetic Left. It's one of our CPI publications. I'll drop the link to it in the chat. And he talks about how these open air concerts were an experiment. It was a psychological experiment to defuse the energy of the anti-war movement. And it was also about trying to figure out how to control people. Fidel Castro Exposes the Synthetic Left. And that's a great book that we published, by the way. And shout out to Robert Lawrence, who made a point of editing it. I wrote the introduction, but it was Robert who did most of the work on that book. He was the editor of it. Shout out to you, Robert. And Fidel Castro, in the first couple essays, he talks about the MK Ultra drug experiments they were doing back then and how they were trying to experiment with controlling the population. Now, what's also interesting in that book, Fidel Castro, that we published, Fidel Castro Exposes the Synthetic Left. He talks a lot about, drugs and the imperialists and how they utilize drugs. He talks about COINTELPRO, and he talks about all these different things. That book that we published, Fidel Castro Exposes the Synthetic Left, the two essays that it opens with by Fidel Castro, I think it's called World Government Part 1 and World Government Part 2. Those are two of Fidel Castro's columns that he wrote when he was in retirement. When they were published, the Party of Socialism and Liberation wrote a hit piece. Did you know this? At the time those essays were published, PSL denounced Cuba for writing it and said that they were spreading LaRouchian conspiracy theories. I am not making this up. In fact, I'll see if I can pull it up, right? I'll pull up the PSL article about this. It's crazy. But the Party of Socialism and Liberation, here it is. The article is dated September 1st, 2010. The Party of Socialism and Liberation denounced Fidel Castro for writing this great article, right? And here's the link. If you don't believe me, this is PSL denouncing Fidel Castro, exposing the synthetic left, right? And this just reveals to you how controlled by the government PSL is. They're supposed to be loyal to Cuba. They're supposed to be loyal to a socialist country. But the leader of a socialist country publishes an article talking about, the synthetic left, and they denounce it because they're more loyal to the synthetic left than they are to Cuba. And so they wrote this article. Go and read it for yourself. Marxism rejects conspiracy theories, blah, 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 blah. Basically denouncing, the Cuban government for daring to point out that the American government was behind the drug revolution of the 60s and behind the new left. Right. And it's amazing, right? That they would rather listen to the American academics and the woke identity politics folks than the Cuban government. If the Cuban government, if Fidel Castro says that the American government created the synthetic left and used it to distort leftist politics and that drug culture isn't good, why would any legit communist object to that? Of all the things to criticize about Cuba, that's what they did. But look, read it for yourself. PSL denounces Fidel Castro and denounces the Cuban government because they exposed MK Ultra, because they exposed the synthetic left. That shows you how controlled the Party of Socialism and Liberation really is. They are government agents, right? And that's why they will not back away from backing Joe Biden. And that's why they boycotted the Rage Against the War Machine protests, because they are woke and they are agents of the American government. And in fact, after January 6th, their only critique was that the Democratic Party didn't go far enough in locking up Trump supporters. And they used words like sedition to describe Trump supporters. So that's a moment where all of this is very important. You might think this is ancient history. Well, look what just happened with Burning Man. Is Burning Man some kind of experiment? Some kind of mind control thing? I don't know. But it's a lot like what happened at Woodstock. And Woodstock, we know, absolutely was. And that matters because the PSL refuses to acknowledge that. Even though Sam Marcy, the founder of their ideological tendency, he thought that it was a government operation. He denounced Woodstock, but the PSL sees Fidel Castro speak up against this kind of mind control operation and has to denounce him. I mean, it's bizarre. It is absolute bizarro world. Fidel Castro writes a couple columns exposing the CIA's involvement in drug culture and mind control, and the PSL loses their minds. I mean, I'll drop the link in the chat one more time. I mean, it's hard to believe, but it tells you what's going on there with PSL and what's going on, with these kind of government operations and this kind of manipulation. And of course, they hate the Rage Against the War Machine rally. Of course, they call me a Nazi. Of course, they want to incite violence against me and my family. Of course, PSL members are constantly harassing me and my wife on social media. Of course they are, because the same reason that they feel a need to defend the CIA and insist that they weren't responsible for the drug culture of the 60s. PSL is a wing of the Democratic Party's apparatus, right? They're a wing of the woke section of the ruling class. They see Donald Trump and his section of the ruling class as the main danger, and so they're trying to control them. That's why they're neutral on Ukraine while promoting wokeism and promoting Joe Biden. So that's what you need to be aware of there. So I just wanted to throw all of that out there. I thought that might be an interesting way to put things for tonight. That's what's on my mind for tonight. So why don't we do the roll call? Names and locations, folks. We'll do that. And then after that, I'm going to play some music for you, and then I'll start answering people's super chat questions. That's what I'm here to do, is to answer your super chat questions. So there you go. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Just let me move some files here, so hopefully they're where they need to be when it's time. All right. Okay, just moving some files, then I'll start reading off names. It takes forever for the files to go where they need to go, and so there we go. Okay, very good. All right, everything's where it needs to go. So we got Deb in Napa. Welcome, Deb. We got Christopher in Texas, Patrick in Maine, Cumbria, United Kingdom, Zeno from the Netherlands, Joe from Japantown, Chi-Town, Gabby Hernandez, Steve and Ann in Georgia, Jamie in St. Paul. Welcome. Herb Bryant in Tampa, Florida. Welcome. Jim and Charlotte in Palmer, Massachusetts. Lake Isabella, California. David Crow. A lot of new names tonight. That's great. AJ and NJ. Mark in Utica, New York. Welcome. We got Colin in Greensboro. Welcome, Colin. And welcome Herb Bryant in Tampa, Florida. Anthony from Detroit. Welcome. Zephyr in Oregon. Welcome. Briggy in Pennsylvania. Glad to have you with us, Briggy. Bob Troy in New York. Ron Wagner in St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad to have you. Glad to have you. We tend to have a lot of people in Missouri. Northern Michigan, a better America. You know, we got a good number of people out there in Missouri. Tyler and Timoshenko and Marion County, Mississippi, Alex F. Portland, Oregon, Dr. Waldorf. Very, very good. Brendan in Northern California. Venezuela. Very good. Chris in Salt Lake City. Welcome, Chris. Clinton from London. Clinton Fraser. Alex from Brazil. Welcome, Alex. Balthazar in Oakland. I've been seeing a lot of Japanese victimization. I don't know what that quite means, but I'll answer that. You're on the list. Fly away, me Zephyr. All right, let's see. We have a Rumble rant. Can you discuss the quasi-socialist nature of the LDS Church? Yes, I can. That is a topic I know a lot about. Jeff in Delaware, Gonzalo in Argentina, Saviero in Mexico, Bendigo, Australia, David Fox, longtime great member of our community. Anybody in the Rockfin? Anyone in the Rockfin? I don't see anybody. Okay. Very, very good. Very, very good. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Welcome, Rice. Folks, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notifications bell. We really want to make sure we don't get messed with. The subscriber thing is getting really weird. I don't know what they're doing, but it's getting bizarre what they are doing on here, and that's why we're migrating to other platforms and we're doing different things because we got Wilburton in Oklahoma. Welcome, Wilburton. Grappentine from Wilburton, Oklahoma. Welcome, welcome. So, they're doing weird things to us in the subscriber count. It's very, very bizarre. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, maybe unsubscribe and then resubscribe just to mess with it because it's doing weird things to us. And we have no idea why, yeah, you just noticed that now. But no, you're on the list. You're on the list. We'll talk about that. So there we go. All right, folks. Now I'm going to put on some music. We've been doing Irish music on here. So there's a traditional Irish song called The Jug of Punch. And then there's another traditional Irish song. It's also called The Drug of Punch that I like better. But people call it the 23rd of June to distinguish it from the other Jug of Punch song. It's a little more peaceful, and it's just kind of a relaxing song. And I found a version of it I can play on here. And so we're going to play two Irish songs that are not political. They're just kind of relaxing, peaceful, happy Irish songs. So the first one is called Jug of Punch. It's obviously about, relaxing and drinking alcohol. I don't drink, but I do find it to be a beautiful song. And it seems appropriate for the early autumn day that we're having here. It was kind of hot and humid in New York City, and I got to ride the ferry with my wife. So here we go.
On the 23rd of June, as I sat weaving all at my loom. Being on the 23rd of June, as I sat weaving all at my loom, I heard at the rush singing on a bush, and the song she sang was the jug of punch for the dog day. Diddly dum diddly diddin diddin da diddin diddin dum diddly day. What more pleasure can a boy desire than sitting down, beside the fire? What more pleasure can a boy desire than sitting down, beside the fire? And in his hand, a jug of punch, and on his knee a tidy wench for the dog a day. Diddly dum diddly diddin diddin da diddin diddin dum diddly day. I sat weaving all at my loom. Being on the 23rd of June, oh, as I sat weaving all at my loom, I heard a thrush singing on bush, and the song she sang was the jug of punch for the dog a day. Diddly dum diddly doo doo da diddly doo dum diddly day. Diddly dum diddly doo doo da diddly doo dum diddly day. Diddly dum diddly doo doo da diddly doo dum diddly day.
All right, so that was the 23rd of June, also known as Jug of Punch, but they call it the 23rd of June, not to confuse it with another traditional Irish song. And now this is a traditional Irish song, which is also not political. It's kind of a romantic but comedic romantic ballad called Red-Haired Mary.
Rawlins Crosshaven, first lash of the knowledge, red-haired Mary. While going to the fair at Dingle, one fine morning last July, while going down the road before me, a red-haired girl I chanced to spy. I stepped up to her, says I, young lady, my donkey he can carry too. Well, seeing as though I have got a donkey, to the Dingle Fair I'll ride with you. Now when we reached the town of Dingle, I took her hand to say goodbye, when a tinker man stepped up beside me, and he belted me in my right eye. Keep your hands on Red-Haired Mary, or and I will send you away. Let's see my faces turning on, night when I am a Now I was feeling kind of peevish, and me poor old eye felt sad and sore. So I gently tapped him with me hobnails, and he flew back through Murphy's door. Hey! He went away to get his brother, the biggest strapping whore of a man you ever did meet. And he gently tapped me with his knuckles, and I was minus my front teeth. A policeman came around the corner. He said, young man, you broke the law. When the donkey up and kicked him in the kneecap, and he fell down and broke his jaw. But the red-haired girl, she kept on smiling. I'll go with you, you handsome young man, she said. We'll forget the priest this very morning, and tonight we'll lie in Murphy's shed. Well, through the fair we roamed together, my black eye and her red hair, smiling gaily on the people, and they and we were a handsome pair. And tonight we'll lie in Murphy's
All right, so there you go, Red-Haired Mary. So yeah, in the Rumble, we do have two people that are watching that announced themselves. We have Ivan says it's spring here in Australia, and then Ahmed says Dr. Ahmed from Egypt. So there we go. And as is tradition on these streams, since we've started doing things on the Rumble, we have given Rumble rants priority. So I'm going to answer the one Rumble rant that has come in, and then from there I will then answer the other questions that have come through as well. So the Rumble rant from Jamie Turner 97 says, can you discuss the quasi-socialist economy run by the Latter-day Saints Church? And the answer to that is yes. All right. Okay, we'll talk about that. The Mormon Church, when it began, see, Marxism teaches us that things often flip their character. There are things that have started out as reactionary that over the course of time have become progressive. There are things that started out as progressive that over through the course of time have become reactionary, right? Great example of this is that, 1848, there was a big revolution in Germany. And what was the anthem of the 1848 German Revolution? What did they march into battle singing? And what did Karl Marx, who was among them, right? Karl Marx and the Communist League were participants in this uprising in 1848 in Germany. And what did they march into battle singing in 1848 during the failed German uprising? They marched into battle singing Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles, Deutschland, über all das Welt. Karl Marx sang that. Friedrich Engels sang that. They all sang that because they were calling for the creation of a modern German nation state. They wanted to overturn feudalism. They wanted to get rid of all the reactionary principalities. The peasants went out to fight. The workers went out to fight. The capitalists went out to fight. And there was a huge revolutionary mobilization demanding the creation of a German nation state, and it failed. And Richard Wagner went into exile, and Karl Marx went into exile, and it was crushed. And a bunch of people fled to Pennsylvania and Ohio. That's why they have German names. They got Amish people there. And the 1848 German Revolution that failed, the failed revolution of 1848, the anthem of it was Deutschland über alles. And it was a German nationalist uprising that was demanding the creation of a modern German state. And it was very progressive. However, that song that I just sang to you is illegal to sing in Germany now. Did you know that? It is illegal. If I was walking down the streets in Berlin and I started singing Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles, they would put the handcuffs on me and I would go to jail. Why? Because that was the anthem that the Nazis used. And that first line, Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles, means Deutschland above all else. And then from there it says Deutschland über all das Welt, meaning Deutschland above the world. And it was an anthem that the Nazis used. Now, that first verse is illegal. They only use like the third verse of the song that talks about universal human brotherhood or whatever. But that first verse that I just sang to you is illegal because it's associated with Nazism. And Nazism was a vicious attempt to restore the power of German imperialism after they lost World War I. It was a fascist regime that was established in Germany. So it's weird because that song began and German nationalism began as progressive, but then we saw it be hijacked and used for something different. That many times there have been people who marched away singing God Save the King, who eventually cut off the head of a king, right? There are many examples of this happening, right? And that often things become their opposite. So Mormonism, right, and this is very important, right? Mormonism as a religion started as something that was part of the Second Great Awakening, right? In the United States, slavery and the slaveholders had way too much fucking power. They could overrule anything in the government. The slaveholders of the South, they controlled the Supreme Court, they controlled Wall Street, and they had way too much power. And slavery is an abominable, horrendous thing. I mean, it was genocide. I mean, if you read about what was done at Angola plantation in Louisiana. It was a death camp. I mean, it was basically an Auschwitz. They were working black people to death. You know, life expectancy once you got there wasn't more than a year. They would just work you to death. There's now a big federal prison there. You know, but you know, I mean, it was genocidal in many ways, you know, and slavery was an abominable thing. And the capitalists of the North were tired of getting kicked around by the Southern slave owners because they wanted to industrialize the United States. And they wanted the new states that came into the country to be free states that could have industry in them, not slave states. And so there was a big division in the ruling class in America. That's what it started out, because the bulk of the ruling class were industrial capitalists who wanted factories and did not want slavery. However, the slave owners of the South were in bed with the British Empire. They were in bed with Wall Street, and because of the Electoral College, their power was inflated, and they were getting everything they wanted. The Fugitive Slave Law was passed, which meant that if a slave got free or ran away from the South and went to Wisconsin or went to Ohio, Ohio was obligated to arrest them and send them back, even if people in Ohio didn't believe in slavery. The whole federal government was being forced to bend over backwards to accommodate the slaveholders. And a lot of people in America didn't like it. The slaveholders had a whole grip on the government, and they were holding back economic development. So what happened? To defeat slavery, you had to have a mass movement. And so my great-great-great-grandfather was a pastor here in New York City, and his name was Charles G. Finney. And he started a church in Manhattan, and he was known for his very fiery revolutionary sermons, but he would not give communion to anyone who worked in any business that had anything to do with slavery. That was a really big deal. And eventually that got to the point that you know, the Wall Street banks that were in bed with the slaveholders, they didn't like him very much. So he moved to upstate New York, and he started the tradition of setting up tents and having tent revivals. And the Second Great Awakening in America was the beginning of revving up the population for the Civil War to defeat slavery. And largely what it was is that the ruling class, the sections of the capitalist class that were opposed to slavery, they started sponsoring a coalition of different forces that were opposed to slavery. And many of the people that were opposed to slavery were very, very radical Protestant Christians. And so there were a number of different Protestant Christian sects that formed during this time. Seventh-day Adventism was formed during this time. Many different sects. You know, one of the sects that was formed at this time was upstate New York. There was a guy named Joseph Smith. And Joseph Smith was this guy who lived in upstate New York, who said that God had given him a vision and presented him with golden plates or whatever. I don't know the whole story. Not my religion, not my business. But Joseph Smith was a radical Protestant preacher who developed his own religious ideas, and he started the Latter-day Saints, the LDS, which was his religion that he started, that was very opposed to slavery. The LDS Church, the Latter-day Saints, were opposed to slavery, and in the early years of the LDS Church, they even had black members, which many people don't know about. But when Joseph Smith was still alive and when the LDS was founded, there were black families that joined the church and were respected members of the church, which back then was a big faux pas. They didn't believe in interracial churches and stuff back then. But Joseph Smith, he was opposed to slavery, and he also believed in racial integration. And so the LDS Church was formed. It was formed in upstate New York, but Joseph Smith, as part of his religion, he believed that you could have more than one wife. Why? He read the Old Testament of the Bible. And Abraham had more than one wife. Moses had more than one wife. And Ezekiel had more than one wife. And look, I mean, if you think the Bible is the end all and be all, and if you're following the Bible, there's nothing in the Bible that specifies that a man has to have only one wife. And so if that's what you base it on, he said, oh, I think I'm allowed to have more than one wife. And so he started marrying men to multiple women. Well, in America, we just don't allow that. And that's a weird aspect of America, I must say. But for some reason, in our culture, we don't tolerate that. It's weird, isn't it? I mean, you know, in America, you know, there are many things that you can do, but that is not one of them. You know, we have always, in our culture, it has always been, and I remember when they were talking about legalizing gay marriage. This would come up. I remember I would watch when gay marriage was being legalized. Republicans would say, well, next, now that marriage can be between a man and a man or a man and a woman, next they'll have a marriage with 3 people. Well, I mean, yeah, in many parts of the world they do. But to Americans, for some reason, our culture just really emphasizes monogamy, right? I don't know what it is. It's just, it's part of the European, the Victorian, British culture. You don't have more than one wife in America. Not acceptable, not okay. You can't do that. And Joseph Smith, well, he thought that according to the Bible and according to his religious teachings and the Book of Mormon and the angels that visited him and the golden plates, and whatever, that's their business, not my religion. He said he's allowed to have more than one wife. Well, they kicked him out of New York State because they made it clear they were going to arrest him for polygamy if he did that. So all of his followers got together and they moved to Ohio. And eventually they moved to Missouri, and they had a little area where they were doing their thing in Missouri. And eventually in Missouri, it was a more unsettled area. It was a place called Nauvoo, Missouri. In a place called Nauvoo, Missouri, Joseph Smith, he had his own private militia that he set up. And it was guys, they were called the Avenging Angels, and they were this armed militia. They were like his bodyguards, guys who followed him around with guns all day long, the Avenging Angels, and they were very anti-slavery, and they were known for assassinating slaveholders. And Joseph Smith's private militia would go and kill slaveholders and prominent advocates of slavery. Little known fact, but this Avenging Angels organization that the Mormon Church set up, they were like hired guns, and they were in favor of abolishing slavery. And they would carry out assassinations of slaveholders. Fascinating. Anyhow, Joseph Smith's church, they developed an economic theory that they called the United Order. And this is what you need to understand. It was called United Order, is what they called it. And sounds a lot like socialism. And I'll link it in the chat. And they developed this economic theory called United Order, which basically means that it's basically a form of quote unquote Christian communism. You hold all wealth in common. All men have to join the military. The state controls the bank. The church controls the banks. The church controls the property. It's called United Order. And that was the economic theory of the Mormon Church. They were opposed to slavery. They believed in racial integration. And they were in favor of this economic theory that Joseph Smith developed that was called United Order. And that was what it was called. You can read all about it. Now, eventually in Missouri, where they had this private army and all of that, they eventually arrested Joseph Smith for polygamy because he had many wives. They took him to the jail. And then, they lynched him. And lynching, legally speaking, right? Lynching means that if someone's arrested, you unarrest them and then kill them. And actually, that's why in many states, unarresting somebody is the legal crime is called lynching. If you unarrest somebody, that you're called a lyncher. So they took him to the jail. They took him to the jail where he was arrested for having more than one wife. And then they broke him out of jail and they shot him in the head. And they killed him, right? He was killed by a mob of people. And afterwards, though, then Brigham Young became the leader of the church, and they moved out to Utah. And in Utah, they established a government based on this economic theory they had called United Order. And United Order was basically a state and church together and church-run economy. But also, it's important to note that when they got out to, you're right, it was Illinois. I'm sorry, Nauvoo is in Illinois. I misspoke. It's not Missouri. It's Illinois. You're absolutely right. It was in Illinois, but anyway, they got out to Utah. In Utah, though, they established a doctrine that they were whites only, and that's when their belief that it was whites only became one of their beliefs. And on top of that, they argued that the Native Americans, it was okay to murder Native Americans because of that their skin had been turned red because they murdered. They had a whole belief that made it okay to kill Native Americans. So they became a whites-only religion, and they didn't drop the whites-only stuff until the 1970s. I think there's a cartoon that came out when Barack Obama was running for president, and it shows Barack Obama shaking hands with Mitt Romney. And Barack Obama says, "Good to see you, Mitt." And he says, "Good to see you too. 40 years ago, I would have been expelled from my church for doing this." And that's true. I mean, the Mormon church, they were really racist for a really long time. No black people allowed. Native Americans, God turned their skin red to punish them for their crimes. And they were very racist for many, many years. But they didn't start out that way. And they came out of a division in the ruling class that resulted in the Second Great Awakening, which was a mass religious revival movement that was anti-slavery. That was anti-slavery. It was anti-slavery, and there you go. There's a lot of aspects of American culture that come out of the Second Great Awakening. The Second Great Awakening, it's weird because now in the United States, religion tends to be associated with very conservative politics. You would never know this, but the Second Great Awakening was a really progressive moment in American history. John Brown, the heroic abolitionist who led his raid on Harper's Ferry, was a fanatic who came out of the Second Great Awakening. And Anna Louise Strong, who was a communist writer, I love her. She's an amazing journalist who wrote about the Soviet Union and China, died in China. Her father had been a pastor in the Second Great Awakening. And she was deeply, she was inspired by his theology to get interested in social justice. The Second Great Awakening was a great moment in American history. And many aspects of American culture come out of the Second Great Awakening. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which is one of the most patriotic songs in American history, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. It's at the march that you always hear in America. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. You've heard it many, many times. Well, the Battle Hymn of the Republic started out originally as a Second Great Awakening song when they started this tradition of tent revival preaching, having church services outdoors. They would have to gather the people to come and join, to announce that they were going to start the tent revival church service. And so one of the songs that they used to, kind of gather people for a tent revival church service, and these church services were like rallies. They were like little anti-slavery rallies. One of the songs that they used to gather people was called "Say, Brother, Will You Meet Us?" And I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to put it on because that was the tune. And then the tune got picked up later, and I'll tell you more of the history of the song. But we'll put on, this is "Say, Brother, Will You Meet Us?" Which was a gathering song. They would gather people during the Second Great Awakening. They would gather them for prayer services with "Say, Brother, Will You Meet Us?" So there we go. Once it loads, I will put it on. There we go. Here we go.
Say, brothers, will you meet us? Say, brothers, will you meet us? Say, brothers, will you meet us on Canaan's happy shore? Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Forever, evermore. By the grace of God we'll meet you By the grace of God we'll meet you. By the grace of God we'll meet you where parting is no more. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Forever, evermore. Jesus lives and reigns forever. Jesus lives and reigns forever. Jesus lives and reigns forever on Canaan's happy shore. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Forever, evermore. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Forever, evermore.
So that's how it started out. And then after John Brown, the leader of the heroic slave rebellion, was killed, after he was killed in, at Harper's Ferry, he tried to launch his anti-slavery rebellion, and he was killed. After that, they changed the lyrics to "Hey Brother, Will You Meet Us?" And we actually got this song, which is called John Brown's Body. And this is Paul Robeson performing John Brown's Body. Anyway, that is the history of that song. And there's many other aspects of American culture that come out of the Second Great Awakening. So I'm really glad you asked me about that, about the early years of the Latter-day Saints Church. I'm really glad you asked me about that, Jamie Turner, because I believe that socialism in America will have a lot to do with the ideals of the Second Great Awakening. I mean, obviously, it'll be a new movement for our time. It'll be a new movement for our moment. But I think that we need to understand the ideals of the Second Great Awakening. If we want to find the good within the American people, a lot of it is going to come from studying the ideals of the Second Great Awakening, the ideals of the Second American Revolution to defeat slavery, and that like right now, so-called leftism is infected with pessimism and anti-growthism, but the Second Great Awakening is all about growth. It is really, really pro-growth. And Tyler, my good friend Tyler McConnell, he turned me on to Wallace Wattles, the founder of New Thought, who was also a socialist. A Christian socialist, in the early 1900s, a supporter of Eugene Debs, and that, was a big advocate of optimism. And very, very much, the Second Great Awakening and the ideals there are a big part of the CPI worldview. We are revolutionary. We are optimistic. We're not national nihilists. We don't want to destroy this country. We want to mobilize a real movement for peace, jobs, democracy, and equality to build a government of action that will fight for working families. And that's going to require us to tap into the optimism of the Second American Revolution. Thoughts on Burning Man and its meaning? I don't know. They wanted to do something at the end of their hippie festivals. They had the idea to burn a giant man. I don't know. People talk about that movie with Christopher Lee, The Wicker Man, which I guess they remade it with Nicolas Cage. It's kind of a scary movie about, a guy who gets lured to an island and human sacrifices and all of that. I've watched that movie. It's a very dark movie. I don't know. It's a horror movie. I don't know if there's necessarily a connection there. I think they just wanted to have a big hippie drug festival out in the middle of the desert. And so the idea was, well, we'll do something that looks pagan and hippie. I don't think it's necessarily a big satanic thing, but I could be wrong, right? Is the whole thing an experiment, kind of like Woodstock or something? I don't know. I gave you my thoughts on that in the opening section of the program. I guess I'll just leave it at that, but there you go. Thank you, John, for dropping this link. We are trying to raise money for our Portland conference, and so we're trying to raise a certain amount of money. To make sure that we do the conference smoothly, we fly in our guests, we have a good venue, etc. So if you can drop a donation our way, that would be great. The donation that we've been requesting from CPI members has been $10 a week. Right. And if every CPI member gives $10 a week, we're set, which is not much between now and the conference. If you can just drop $10 a week, if you're in a position to do that, we would be set. There's other people in CPI who've stepped up and given quite a bit more. We've gotten some bigger contributions. And, that's, we're in the process of mobilizing the membership around that, making sure that we have the funds we need to do the conference. So. Yeah, there you go. There you go. All righty. Thank you, John. All right. Thoughts on Putin and Kim Jong-un meeting later this month? I think that's a really good sign. North Korea has been very supportive of Russia in the current confrontation that's happening. And Russia is saying, you know what? The American imperialists have sanctioned us. Why do we have to continue cooperating with any of these sanctions on North Korea? North Korea and Russia are getting closer. Meanwhile, we saw that it was South Korea that just returned Iran's money that they had frozen. And Biden has said he wants to meet with the North Koreans unconditionally. So there's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of reason to be optimistic regarding the Korean Peninsula right now. I think there's a very good chance that Kim Jong-un is going to Russia to meet with Putin to set the stage for meeting with Biden. Right? I don't know that for a fact, but I get the impression that might be what's going on, that North Korea is Russia's ally, and they have to make clear that they're going to meet with Putin first. That meeting with Biden, they're meeting with their enemy. You know what I mean? They're meeting with a country they're still technically at war with, so they have to meet with Putin first. But I think that there's a very good chance that after North Korea meets with Putin, they will then go back and they'll talk to Putin about, getting everything in order, and that they won't make any deals that will surprise Russia or anything like that. And then I think there's a very good chance that Kim Jong-un will meet with Biden after he meets with Putin. That's what I believe is going on. I don't know that for a fact, but I think that is in the works. And I do believe that if there's going to be a thaw in international relations, if things are going to start to de-escalate, it'll be on the Korean Peninsula. I really do believe that. You know, that the de-escalation, if we're going to see anything, is going to be on the Korean Peninsula. And if it ends, if we get World War III, it'll start on the Korean Peninsula. I think that the Korean Peninsula is vital. If North Korea and South Korea go to war, it's over. Russia and China are going to war with the United States. I mean, at that point, it's over. But if North Korea and South Korea start to reunify, I think that at that point we can start to see, if we start to see progress on the Korean Peninsula, we can start to see a de-escalation internationally. I really do believe that the Korean Peninsula is kind of where it all meets, because it's all one country, right? These other conflicts that are happening, Ukraine is not one country, you know, etc. But well, I guess you could say Taiwan and China are still one country. They are, but you know, a lot of people, unfortunately, on the island of Taiwan don't think that. And, you know, it's a little bit more complicated. You know, there's one China, obviously, but I think on the Korean Peninsula, where you have two governments that are at war with each other, you know, I think that, you know, if we see progress there, things are going well. But if things start to fall apart there, I think that's a sign that everywhere else things are going to go badly. I really love this commemorative coin that was a gift to me from a CPI member. Shout out to the CPI member who gave this to me. I really love it. This is a commemorative coin of Kim Jong-un meeting with Donald Trump. And we have been marching around with our banner, finish what Trump started. And we want peace on the Korean Peninsula. We absolutely want peace on the Korean Peninsula. That is what we are all about. That is what we are all about. So there we go. And that was a very good question. And that is my suspicion about what that meeting is about. All righty. All righty. Burning Man looks like a gathering of weirdos. I don't know. A lot of people go to it who, I mean, I don't know how you have the money to do that. I must say, you know, I mean, some of us have to work for a living, right? And we can't just disappear into the middle of the desert for, you know, 5 or 6 months. There was a guy I knew years ago who was a cab driver in New York City, and he would drive the cab and save money. And then he would go out to Burning Man for a few months every year. I mean, it's a big, long thing. It's not, you know, it's not just like you go in and go out. I also understand the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party, got billboards for Burning Man with Bob Avakian's face on them at one point, which I do not know why they did that, but for many, many different billboards along the way of Bob Avakian's face in the lead up to Burning Man. And many people made fun of them for that. I want to see if I can find an image of that, or a video of Bob Avakian at Burning Man. That was one of the weirdest things, the RCP. They've done some weird things in their time, but Bob Avakian at Burning Man, that was pretty darn weird. Bob Avakian, Burning Man. Let's see if I can find that. That was one of the weirdest things the RCP has done. And I'm trying to see if I can find a video of it or something. I hate the YouTube search mechanism. It doesn't work anymore. I typed in Bob Avakian. I'm not interested in what happened this weekend at Burning Man. Come on. You know, I mean, it's just gotten so bad. It's just gotten so bad. The search mechanism on YouTube doesn't work. They're so afraid. They're so desperate to not send you anything that's not mainstream, to not present you in that way. I typed in Bob Avakian at Burning Man, and nothing's coming up but news reports about. Okay, let me Google Bob Avakian Burning Man. There we go. All right. See, here we go. I can put a picture of it, I guess. I can't find a video of it because the YouTube search mechanism is weird. But yeah, the Revolutionary Communist Party, that was something that they did. That was a weird thing that they did, is they bought, you know, billboards of Bob Avakian's face and put them, you know, all over Burning Man, you know, which was kind of a strange thing that they did. It was a bit strange. But you know, hey, to each their own, right? I guess the RCP, their idea is the kind of person who would go to Burning Man is the kind of person who would join the RCP. So there we go. Yeah, I found 2 different pictures of the RCP at Burning Man, of Bob Avakian ads at Burning Man. So we'll put up the first one here. Right. So here's one of the ads they bought at Burning Man. There we go. right? That's billboard number one. They bought many billboards at Burning Man to promote Bob Avakian. That is apparently one of them. That's one of them. And there you go. That's Bob's face at Burning Man. And then they put up another ad of Bob Avakian at Burning Man. Not a joke, folks. They actually did this. I am not making this up. The truth is stranger than fiction, as they say. And they've got Bob Avakian at Burning Man. I guess that's like a glow in the dark sign for Bob Avakian's face. A little strange, but hey, maybe, I mean, they're building their organization. Maybe the kind of person that would join the RCP is the kind of person who would also go to Burning Man. I don't know. Burning Man is not where I would choose to advertise politically. I'm a whole out of the movement to the masses kind of guy. I don't think that the hippies at Burning Man are who I necessarily want to recruit, but could be wrong. So there you go. And I'll be posting my chat with Jeff Young about the letter to Bob Avakian. I'll be posting that shortly after this. It was a great chat. All right, next question. All right. I've been seeing a lot of Japanese victimization. What do you mean by that, Battle Cossack? What do you mean, Japanese victimization? What are you referring to? Are you referring to people that that because of that are portraying Japan as victims and glossing over their history of atrocities? Is that what you're referring to? Because that's what many people around the world, especially in Asia, Korea, China, the Philippines, there's a lot of people who really feel that, we feel bad for Japan about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but the Western capitalist countries do not acknowledge that Japan killed literally millions of people in Korea and in China and in the Philippines and in many, many different parts of the Pacific. That the Japanese imperialists were, they were like the Nazis. And that because we hate China and because Japan is aligned with the United States and is basically an ally of NATO, in the United States, we gloss over that. And it's infuriating, just like we gloss over the crimes of British imperialism, right? People in the United States have no idea. They say communism starved people. No, the British Empire starved people all over the world. Millions and millions and millions of people were starved to death by the British Empire. Well, Japanese imperialism committed horrendous atrocities to people. And the comfort women and the rape at Nanking, you go down the line, right? And that there is a lot of glossing over Japanese crimes, especially, when we do acknowledge the United States committed a horrendous crime against Japan with the dropping of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But, that's worth pointing out. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Don't know. I don't know if that's what you're referring to or not. And if anyone has any more super chats, by the way, I've got a couple more here, but we're getting through them quite fast. So if you got any more questions, now's the time to shoot me a Rumble rant or a Rockfin question or a super chat, because if not, we'll be wrapping up pretty soon here. But that's okay. We'll probably be back tomorrow night, right? We do this all the time. So there you go. There you go. All righty. Jason Unruhe appears to be going nuts and obsessive. Yeah, it's a little sad. He used to do such great work. When he used to do video after video debunking the lies about North Korea, which were well researched. He used to do videos about Marxist economics that were very good, talking about the problem of overproduction, etc. He has long videos defending Stalin and stuff, but lately, if you watch him, it's like he's getting Patreon money from woke people, because every video he makes is just about, some conservative group somewhere doing something that he doesn't like, and they all hate communists, so he hates them. And look, that guy has been cyberbullied. That guy's been cyberbullied very, very, very viciously, number one. Number two, he uses a lot of drugs. He uses weed. Weed is not good for your brain. I apologize if there are some proud weed smokers in there, but I'm just telling you, I don't think weed is good for your brain. And third, he's never been part of an organization, right? he's never been in a real activist setting. I know he was part of Leading Light on the internet or something, but he's never been a real activist. Okay. His communism has always been, it's always been done in social isolation, with him just on social media talking out of his ass. And on top of that, it's always been an expression of why he's isolated. He's alienated from Canadian society. He thinks the first world is evil, so he's a communist to be alienated. His communism has always been an expression of alienation, and it's always been conducted in isolation. And I knew that something was off about Jason Unruhe when I remember when Kshama Sawant first got elected in Seattle. Right? It's Kshama Sawant. She's a Trotskyite, right? She's not perfect. She's not great in a lot of ways, but she won the city council election in Seattle. And he made this video saying that doesn't matter because if she was a real communist, she would go to India and join the Naxalites. And I was like, dude, it means a lot that in a major U.S. city, enough people voted for a Trotskyite communist that they got elected. That does mean something. But he was just completely off his rocker. I mean, it was just like, no, nothing matters. Trotskyites are not real communists. And if she was really a communist, she would go to India and join this obscure sect that's robbing people at gunpoint in the mountains. And it's like the Naxalites in India are going nowhere. And for him to make that statement, I mean, it's kind of racist, honestly, just because she happens to be of Indian heritage. Oh, you're a sellout, you know. I mean, I saw that and I'm just like, damn, like, you know, that's really like, he doesn't get it, right? He really doesn't get it. And I saw that and I was just like, this guy doesn't get it. That was the first sign. And I tried to be his friend and I stayed his friend, and he would just, it was like his audience would like psych him up against me and I would just ignore it. I would ignore it until finally he wouldn't stop. And I debated him a couple times and he just, you know, I will say something weird happened, and that there was a group of people, I won't even say the name of the group, that started feeding him information on social media. And it was very complex. They were making very extreme allegations about all kinds of stuff. And he was making these long drawn out videos repeating what this organization was telling him. And I remember saying to Jason, like, you know, you might want to fact check some of this. You may want to, I mean, how do you know all this is true? And he was just doing these long drawn out videos based on this information. People were inboxing him. And I was like, Jason, I don't know if this is true or not. You know, I mean, this stuff might not be true. He was doing that. You know, it seems like the Antifa crowd has gotten into his brain, right? You know, that he's, you know, he thinks he's got an Antifa flag behind him. He thinks that, you know, that Trump is a Nazi, that fighting conservatives is somehow a good thing. But then he's a third worldist. And as a third worldist, he should not think that way, because third worldists think that it's pointless in the first world and they just want to cause problems for imperialism. So you'd think he would get that, but no, I don't know. And now, I mean, it's just like, I never wanted to fight with him. I tried to get along with him many times, that he just, you know, and it's not just me. There's been a number of people that have had falling outs with him. He can't maintain friendships and he's just deteriorated. And that's why we can't have this be a social media thing. Social media is not good for your brain, right? The only reason I'm on here right now is because this is a way to stay connected with all of you and try to get you all involved in a real life organization. I'm building an in real life organization called the Center for Political Innovation, the CPI. That's what I'm doing, right? And these broadcasts keeps me in touch with you all. It's a way to keep our community plugged in. It's a way to spread our ideas. You know, so it's good in that sense. But there you go. All righty. I see you're on the list, Roy. You're on the list. All right. Some Marxists say LGBT is an imperialist counter gang. Well, I hear you. Well, first of all, I want to point out, right, that the reason that that's important to point out, that some Marxists think that, is because I'm constantly hearing people say that the LGBT agenda is a communist conspiracy. No, it's not. And I'm so tired of right-wingers saying everything they don't like is communist, because it's not, right? And it's like a way to get right-wingers to hate communist countries, even though they have nothing to do with it. And it's a way to like get them to hate communism. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, until the 1980s, almost all communists in the world thought that homosexuality was bourgeois decadence, that it was a disease from capitalism, etc. Now, starting in the 80s, as a result of the gay rights movement, that started to change. And it's a good thing that it changed because, you know, LGBT people shouldn't be bullied. What you do in your bedroom is not my business, right? You know, you're on the list. Don't worry. What you do in your bedroom is not my business, right? And that bullying and suppression of people for, you know, how they are oriented and how they love is, you know, with consenting adults is not a good thing, right? But you know, the idea that the trans thing is a big plot by communists is ridiculous because I can guarantee you go to most communist countries in the world, they're not into all of that. So it's important to point out that no, and then on top of that, there's this memo that's been sent out in the communist world that you cannot associate with anyone who has any objection to that. You know, like that should be the deciding issue. No, that's not how Leslie Feinberg saw things. I worked with Leslie Feinberg. She was the first openly trans activist in the United States, and she didn't see things that way. She stood in solidarity with Iran and with many countries that were of disagreement on the LGBT issue. So there you go. All righty. Have you heard of the manosphere? It's toxic. I don't know exactly what that is, right? Is that the incels and the MGTOWs and all of that? Is that what that refers to? That's been a part of the internet for a long time, right? Is that what that is? It's like the men that resent women part of the internet, right? Is that what that refers to? I would assume that that's what that refers to, right? It's just a section of the internet that is for men that resent women, incels, MGTOWs, etc. Is that what I mean? Okay. I don't know, but you know, I mean, a lot of that is that, you know, men are not as social as women are. Women tend to be more social than men. And if a man is autistic or on the spectrum, that can be intensified. And that for a lot of men, that you know, may not be the most attractive men or have issues with girlfriends. The internet is a place they can hide, and their frustration about that gets compounded with, with other men, and they, you know, it just builds on itself. Look, incels have always been around. The Phantom of the Opera, he's an incel, right? He's ugly. Women won't sleep with him, so he, you know, sets off bombs at the opera and kidnaps people and stuff like that, right? I mean, if you watch the musical Oklahoma, Judd Fry is an incel, right? He's like, oh, I need a woman. I mean, there's always been men who feel that way. And I think there's a lot of men who go through a phase of feeling that way, resenting women. When they're teenagers, they feel like women don't like them or whatever. That's just that's part of gender dynamics, right? What the internet has created is that men who feel this way or have felt this way for some time get on the internet and they suddenly meet a bunch of other people that feel that way. And then they reinforce each other's negative feelings, and it builds up into a whole identity. It builds up into a whole identity that they've built up around it. That's really unfortunate, and look, I mean, the internet is a nasty place. There's a lot of very mean people on the internet. And also, it's hard to be a young man these days, right? The expectations that are there, and the condemnation that's piled onto you. And, it's not a great time to be a young man. The Jordan Peterson thing, the incel thing is all part of that. But you know what? The CPI community, we have women and we love our female members, and they all step up to be leaders, right? But we are an overwhelmingly male organization too. And I think that we speak to young men as well. So, you know what? I don't, as far as the incel thing, I don't know what to say, but it is based on this kind of, people have to get out of the mindset of projecting the frustrations of today onto all of history. That's a really important thing, because, people, just because things aren't going well today doesn't mean that that'll always be the case. And that I think, I made a video saying that communists in America seem like incels. They have this mindset of, we'll never win people over. This is just an evil country. No, I mean, the world is constantly changing, and we need to be kind of trying to figure out how we can insert ourselves. And the same goes for incels, right? You're saying, oh, I'll never get a girlfriend. Well, no, the world is constantly changing. Your life circumstances are changing. Your life circumstances are changing, etc. And you got to figure out how to make things work, and you're not going to expect immediate results, right? So yeah, I mean, that's all I can say to that. There you go. All right. Yes, the Japanese utilize the nukes as an excuse to promote anti-China stuff and portray themselves as more important than victims of imperialism. That's very true. There's a glossing over of the horrendous crimes of Japanese colonialism. We don't learn about it in the United States, right? It's just glossed over, and that's a big problem because the crimes of Japanese colonialism and imperialism are pretty horrendous, and the fact that there's not an acknowledging of that is a really big problem in U.S. society. And it's, we're pounded over the head with this body count about why we should hate communism, but no one wants to talk about the crimes of American imperialism, British imperialism, Japanese imperialism. All right, folks, I guess that's our show for tonight. I'm going to put on the closing music, and then we'll be done. In the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. All right. Thanks, everybody.